Joseph. It's honestly a really hard story to do in 12 minutes because I feel like it takes 12 minutes just to tell the story without even telling the impact of the story. So we're going to see how this goes because I have no idea how this is going to go. So anyway, so Joseph was the firstborn son of Rachel, and Rachel was the woman that Jacob, who is Joseph's father, really loved the most. Like, he was, like, you know, he worked for 14 years for his uncle just so that he could have Rachel as a wife. So he was, like, super protective and super, he really spoiled Joseph, basically, is what happened. So, obviously, because, and then Jacob had 10 other sons before Joseph, so Joseph was, he was doted on probably way more than he should have been, and that kind of made the other 10 jealous because they're all like, well, we're also sons, so why aren't we getting all this special treatment? And then Jacob goes and makes, has a special coat made for Joseph. And this coat, I was reading on this coat, and it says it's like many colors, but it probably was also like different seams and different types of materials even too. So it wasn't just like Jesus had, he had like a tunic that was seamless, and so it was just all one material and all one thing. And this was like different materials and different stuff. So it was really special because of that. So Joseph's brothers, they weren't just jealous of Joseph, they hated Joseph. I think it says like 3 or 4 times in Genesis 37 that Joseph's brothers hated him. So, he obviously wasn't, I mean, as great as he might have been, they didn't like him very much. Being famous, or not famous, but being so doted on, I'm pretty sure that he probably was a little bit of a spoiled brat, because you can't be spoiled and not be a brat, because I have yet to see that. So, one night, probably multiple nights, I don't know, it says that Joseph had dreams, and both of the dreams were of Joseph, like, basically being in charge of his brothers and his family. Like, he was going to be the guy in charge, and they're like, well, why do you get to be in charge? You're just our brother, and half brother at that. But he probably shouldn't have told his brothers, but he did anyway because he thought maybe he wanted them to be excited too. I don't know. It didn't work because they hated him more. And then he had another dream. He had 2 dreams, I said that already. But the first one was different than the second one. And the second one, he even told his father, and Jacob, like, kind of scolded him for the dream and was like, oh, that's silly. But then even it says in Genesis that he wondered what it meant. So, I mean, he was even kind of curious, like, well, what does this mean? So getting down to the rest of the story. So Joseph goes out to see his brothers, because Jacob was like, hey, go check on them, see how they're doing, bring me a report back. And they see him coming, and they're like, oh man, here comes the dreamer. And they decide that they want to kill him originally. And Reuben was like, maybe let's not kill him, maybe let's, just throw him in this cistern over here, because there's no water in it, it's not like he's going to drown or anything. So they did that. They took his coat, they decided to play games with it or whatever, I don't know. They threw him in the cistern, and then apparently Reuben had gone away, because then some slave traders came, and they were on their way to Egypt, and the brothers sold Joseph off for 20 pieces of silver. And then Reuben comes back and is mad because Joseph's gone. So he obviously wasn't there when they traded him, or sold him. So then they, dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood and pretended that he had been attacked by jackals or wild animals, and Jacob was distraught and very sad, and it said he mourned for him for a long time, and even said that he would go to the grave mourning for Joseph. Spoiler alert, that doesn't happen. So Joseph gets to Egypt, he gets sold into Potiphar's house, and Potiphar was like Pharaoh's commander of the armies. So, I mean, he was out a lot, doing crazy war type stuff, I guess. And Joseph, the favor of the Lord was on Joseph so much that Potiphar put him in charge of the entire house and was like, you just take care of all my affairs, and I don't even have to worry about anything except for what I want to eat today. So that's pretty cool. But then tragedy happens, and Pharaoh's wife decides that she really likes Joseph and she wants to sleep with him, and Joseph's like, but that's a sin. I can't do that. I can't do that to my master. I can't do that to you. I can't do that to God. That's crazy. And Pharaoh's wife, that's funny. Potiphar's wife is like, no, you're going to sleep with me. And he's like, no, I won't. And so he runs off without a cloak, I think is what the Bible says. He runs off without a cloak. So he's like kind of naked, and Potiphar's wife screams, and people come running, and she's like, oh, he raped me, and that's not true. But obviously, as a slave, nobody's going to believe the slave over the wife. So Joseph goes to jail, and he goes to the jail where Pharaoh sends all the bad guys or people he thinks are bad. And same thing happens actually in the prison. Joseph has so much favor on his life that the warden is like, dude, you're awesome. You can take over for me, and I'll just kind of be lazy and make sure that you're not doing something crazy. That's not exactly what he said, but that's the Erica version of Genesis. So, because I have less minutes than I need. So anyway, cupbearer and baker end up in jail. Joseph interprets their dreams, because I had dreams one night, because dreams just kind of follow Joseph, and Joseph interprets dreams, and that's pretty cool, because I want to have that one day. But, so Joseph, the dreams aren't important. The meaning of the dreams were important, because the cupbearer went back to Pharaoh's house 3 days later, just like Joseph said, and the baker ended up dying. I think he got beheaded because Pharaoh didn't like him. So, he went, and then Joseph told the cupbearer, hey, remember me, and let Pharaoh know that I'm still here because, I was wrongly imprisoned, and I'm from a different land, blah, blah, blah. And the cupbearer was like, yeah, sure, I'll remember, forgot, because that's what people do, they forget. So 2 years pass, and Pharaoh suddenly has this dream that, he has these dreams, 2 dreams, and it's like the 7 fat cows and the 7 skinny cows come eat the 7 fat cows, and then there's the nice full grain of wheat, and it gets eaten by the skinny grain of wheat, and so basically it means that there's going to be 7 years of plenty, and then 7 years of famine. And this is what Joseph tells Pharaoh, and then he's like, hey, you need to find someone that's really smart that can do this and collect 1/5 of the grain from everybody in Egypt, so then we'll have enough for the end, and we'll have enough for the famine. And Pharaoh's like, you know what? You're the man for the job. And so Joseph was made second in charge over all of Egypt, and he got this really nifty name, Zaphnath Paneah, which means God speaks and lives, and I think that's really cool. because Joseph's name, like his actual Hebrew name, means he will add. And I was like, well, that's cool, because Joseph definitely added a lot to people's lives because of the way that he acted. Like, I mean, he might have been a spoiled brat, but I mean, he was a pretty smart guy. If Potiphar and this warden put him in charge, and then of course Pharaoh's like, dude, you're awesome, and so Pharaoh puts him in charge of all of Egypt, and so it's like God added to these people by bringing Joseph into their lives. And like, really, you know, if you're faithful with the small things, God will give you bigger things. So I'm pretty sure that although we don't hear about Joseph being in charge of anything until he gets to Potiphar's house, I feel like he was in charge of things before that, because you know, he had to have been faithful somewhere, that Potiphar would have been like, hey, I think I should put you in charge because you know what you're doing and you're a pretty smart guy, and stuff like that. So the rest of the story is Joseph ends up getting redemption with his brothers. Like, his brothers come to Egypt and he tests them to find out if they actually really are repentant of what happened. And then once he does that, then and he finds out that they're actually for real and stuff. And then Joseph finally reveals his identity and is like, hey, I'm your brother, and I've already forgiven you for what happened. And that's probably one of the coolest things too, because I mean, it's been like 17 years, 12, something. It's been a long time since Joseph has seen his brothers, talked to his brothers, thought about his brothers. I mean, I'm sure he thought about them all the time. He was in jail for 2 years. What else are you going to do but think about people that have wronged you? I guess. I don't know. I've never actually been in jail, but that's just my personal thought. So, anyway, so he ends up getting this redemption with his brothers, and like, because they were like super, you know, they were still feeling real bad. They're like, dude, we killed our brother. Or they thought they killed him because, you know, they probably thought that because he was a spoiled brat, he wouldn't be good at anything, I would imagine. But he might have had some form of something that they've been like, well, maybe he can make it. But, so it's just, the thing that really sticks out to me most about Joseph's story, aside from the fact that it's one of the longest stories in Genesis, like next to Abraham's, is well, the biggest thing is the redemption, but it's also watching Joseph succeed at like everything he does. They have that saying, you know, everything that he touches turns to gold, and I feel like that kind of happened with Joseph. Like, everything that Joseph did, he really did it for the glory of God. Like, he even said, I don't interpret these dreams, God gives me the interpretation. Like, I can't interpret dreams in and of my own self. It's really God that does this. And so it's a really powerful story of what happens when you're faithful with what God gives you. And and then even with the redemption too, like I said, Joseph was even like, I've already forgiven you. And that's really powerful too, because it's really hard to forgive someone who basically sold you into slavery and hated your guts and stuff like that. And Joseph makes it look so easy, is really the thing. And I don't even know what to say. But it's really powerful, and it's one of my favorite stories because of all of the power and all of the trust that Joseph had in God, that God would redeem him, that God would restore him, and God would give him more, and he did. And Joseph ended up he saved Israel, like the country, the nation, because without him there would be no Israel, and he got to save Egypt, and that's really powerful. And so